Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of DC Stargirl, a great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love the frenemies being the subtitle of the season. We got that at the end of season 2, but also I do love that this whole season is about second chances all around. Because we have that awkward opening where it's just like Jakeem is doing his paper route and it's like, oh, the living paper to the shade. Because I forgot he was just sticking around. I thought we knew Tigress, Sportsmaster, and Artemis were sticking around. I didn't remember he was going to stay in Blue Valley as well. So that's awkward. Seeing them as the neighbors to the Whitmores and everything. Yolanda seeing Cindy, and it's just like, it's awkward all around. And Beth has got her own awkward situation. Her parents, now that they know so much about her being a superhero, they're obsessed with her, which I do love that this is such a flip on their dynamic. Because even in season 2, she had already kind of shifted away from being that person because she had friends now. She didn't really have any friends for a long time until like the JSA, but then also Dr. Midnight, Chuck was her best friend too. So she's kind of come out of her shell and become an even, a better version of herself. She's grown. And now it's like, oh, like now my parents are so insufferable. And like, I don't think Beth ever realized that she was kind of like that to her parents, but now it's like, right, she has friends. She's moved on. She's grown. And now it's like her parents now know she's a superhero. Now they're obsessed with her. I mean, it's almost like they're working out their issues with their relationship by focusing on her. Like, it almost seems like it is a substitute for, rather than dealing with their stuff, it's like, well, let's focus on the fact that we have a superhero. It feels like it could be that, but we'll ultimately have to wait and see. But it's just like, yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing. Rick is obviously still trying to bring back Solomon Grundy. He's done everything the Shade said to bury Grundy here and here and here. It hasn't worked out, so. And obviously, Yolanda and Rick are the ones who had the biggest issues with this whole, this experiment of working with the villains, which I'm like, to be fair, it's not even like the first show of the DC shows to do that, considering it's like, well, what were the Legends based on? That's always the thing. It's not even like it was an even split. It was like, obviously, like 80% heroes, 20% villains. More so like 90-10, but still. Because there were only like 2 villains, and at that point in time, like, Snart was anti-hero-ish. Heatwave was the Rory, aka Heatwave, was the only one that was like still villain. But either way. So it's like, to this extent, and I love it. Because this is one of those shows kind of like Legends of Tomorrow, like, even when a lot of the shows, I'm fine with, like, the human element to it, but, like, Legends of Tomorrow, like, always kind of, like, yeah, they were just, because they were a team of misfits, them, like, doing the superhero thing, sometimes took a backseat to them just being people, and I was totally fine with that. And I love that this show kind of balances that so much, of just kind of, like, that just regular, normal human element to things. Pat wanting to lock the door all the time. Courtney's like, no, we need to leave it unlocked. And it's like, Sportsmaster literally broke into your house 5 o'clock in the morning to start making shakes so that he could put Pat back on a program. And he's like, and Pat's like, well, remember what happened last time? I could have killed you. And he was like, yeah, sure, buddy. I love that. Also, Pat with the mustache, and Sylvester being like, wow, that mustache, it looks great on you. It's like, what? No. Mike's like, he looks like a parallel, like, evil Pat Dugan. And it's like, Mike, you'll understand one day, like, that's just like what was it Sylvester was saying? Something of the nature of, once you start shaving, you'll realize, because it's like kind of a part of a man's journey, like growing, facial hair. And Mike's like, I already shave it. And Sylvester's like, do you? So, but he's trying to make himself a hospitable guest by fixing up the place. And you could tell he was already kind of a little bit overstepping the boundaries the moment he made a whole display case for Cosmo, but it was also right by his bed. And Courtney's like, cool, it was right beside your bed. He's like, oh, this is kind of too much, isn't it? He's like, no, I have no interest in being a starman. He's like, then why'd you build a case like right by your bed? Because I do love that element to it too, because he's like, there was some part of him that still wanted to do it, even though he's like, no, I'm done being Starman. He kind of gets into like the kind of like the horrible angle of like, cool, waking up in your coffin and being buried alive, and then kind of be like, holy crap, I'm alive. kind of tie into the superhero realm, just kind of like just the way my brain works. It ties me to the Umbrella Academy because Robert, the actor who plays Four, aka Klaus, aka Four, was spoilers, Nathan on Misfits, and that's basically how he found out about his power of, spoilers, immortality. And it was like at the end of series one, he was buried alive because everyone thought he was dead, and he was kind of stuck like, oh, kind of had to wait to be undug, but he waited to be dug up, whereas like Sylvester had to do it himself, so that's horrendous. But he goes out with Pat and everything, and he's like, no, Pat, like, I'm happy that you're happy and everything. It's like, oh my God, like, if the rest of the JSA was alive, they'd be impressed. Like, you be sitting at the table right now instead of just kind of being relegated to sidekick, which I'm like, man, the sidekicks in, like, the DC universe get no love. I mean, come on. It's like everything with like, I mean, he has his issues. I mean, it's not just him. I mean, Jason's got his own issues, but like you look at Titans, obviously that's like a darker take on it, but still it's like, yo, the sidekicks get no love. They get relegated as just like, you're the sidekick. I mean, Pat's had to deal with that his entire life. Yes, he's the adult, but he's still sidekick I think he's still relegated to sidekick, to Courtney, but even then probably like still relegated to sidekick / guardian of the new JSA, so either way, Pat and Sylvester kind of go out and they're enjoying themselves, but it's like the fact is to have Mike, Courtney, and Barbara standing there kind of disappointing, like, wow, do you almost like parents being like, do you realize how late it is? It's like, yeah, you kind of promised Courtney you weren't going to be Starman, and he just kind of puts his head down like, I'm sorry, and even the staff's like light at the top kind of like drips down almost like, I'm sorry too. So, and he kind of admits that being Starman is all he has. I mean, he never had much of a life. His sister's gone. His parents weren't that great to begin with, but even they're gone. And now there has to, whether he'll ever admit it or not, there has to be a little bit of jealousy knowing like, I think we could definitely lean into it. Whether they will or not, it's going to be an interesting thing. But you take, like, the fact is that Pat, the sidekick, had done so much for himself in the past 10 years. He's no longer just working on the car being the sidekick. Like, he has a full-blown robot. He's the one that's been guiding the young JSA, doing what they honestly couldn't fully do. And it's like, not only did they take down the ISA, they also ended up stopping Eclipso, something that they couldn't fully do. And they had to go down a route that none of them are proud of to do it, and Courtney and them found another way around it, So, I'm sure there's a part of like that. I don't know if they'll really lean into it, but I think you could definitely almost you could almost tell like there could be an element of Sylvester being upset that it's like, right, his sidekick is doing so much better, because like when Courtney's like, oh, we'll balance it out, like while I'm at school the staff is yours, and that when I get home it's mine. I'm like, that juggling act is going to be really interesting and really complicated, and I think that's going to lead to Sylvester and Courtney kind of bumping heads. I think it's because Courtney wants to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Because she doesn't feel right taking away the staff from him, because it's like, right, being Starman's all you are. Like, I think Courtney's lucky that she has Pat and her mom balancing her out, because she was just wanting to be superhero all the time, but she has made a lot more time for just being Courtney and living her life. And it's like, yeah, like Sylvester's a cautionary tale of it, and it's like, and that's also probably got to bother you to some extent too, that Courtney kind of has everything. She has a family. To be fair, she's a teenager, but still, like, she has a family, she has the life. She isn't just Stargirl, like, she is multi-layered, multifaceted, and it's like, for Sylvester, it's not that way for him, so I just think that's such an interesting, dichotomy to really dive into, and I think we're gonna, over the course of this season, we're gonna see kind of like this way of handling things, this tag team that Courtney's kind of pushing for, isn't going to work out. It's because she doesn't have, like, she's not trying to like take this away from him, because she knows it's kind of all he has. So, but it's going to come to a head at some point in time, because it's like, right, she's the new leader of the JSA, but he's going to come butting in, and he's probably going to make a lot of choices, and that's what Courtney was worried about, him coming, taking the staff away, because she loves being Stargirl. It's become a part of her now. It's not all that she is, but it is a part of her, because being Stargirl also brought a lot of, like, it made her and Pat connect. It brought her and her family closer together. It brought her friends, her team, so being Stargirl brought a lot of good, yes, it brought complications like villains and bad guys, but it brought a shining light to her life, which I also love that, like, you see, like, newspapers talking about some of her exploits of, like, oh yeah, like, a scout troop was lost and they were guided by a shooting star or something like that, so... But I forgot to talk about it earlier when I was referencing Cindy. I love the fact is that she walked past that old lady with the grocery and she's just like, can I help you? She's trying her role at being an upstanding citizen. So I love that. And later on, she's sitting at the quote unquote losers table. It's like, I guess now that I'm sitting here, it's no longer the loser table. And Rick's like, it never was. And she's almost like, that's cute. And then Artemis is like, yeah, go team, woo. And it's like, wait, is she part of this now too? It's like, Courtney's like, I have no idea what that's about. But it's like, Artemis is just kind of making sure. It's like, like, considering our parents are on a first name basis, you're all about forgiving people. Cindy's part of the squad and everything. It's like, yeah, it's fine. Like, she's like, probably like, I'm guaranteed. I'm so awesome. How could I not be? Which I love her mom visiting Barbara later on. Barbara's like, what? She's like, yeah, I hope, like, our bad blood between us as well as Courtney and Artemis doesn't get in the way. And it's like, whatever she wants, she'll get. And, but Barbara's like, I don't really have any say over the JSA stuff. So it's like, huh. And Tigress is like, okay, like, she'll audition. So when the No Limit Gang showed up earlier, which, to be fair, it's still a possibility. But I was like, did they set this up? Like, I don't think Artemis might not be in the know about it, or maybe she was, but I feel like Tigress set that up, right? Or both her and Sportsmaster set that up, right? Because if you look at their associates, they blurred their faces, but one of them was definitely Tigress. I'd assume one would be Sportsmaster, because another tie they have is like the Gambler. But also, I think you even saw like Brainwave's picture. Like, a lot of the faces were blurred, but I'm pretty sure it's like it's a lot of like ISA people. But I definitely noticed Tigress amongst that. So I was like, she had to, like, set this up like an audition, right? The fact is that guard looked like she got super jacked up, so this wasn't like, they had to make it look real, I guess. Or Tigress was like, well, they're expendable, who cares? We're not villains anymore, so we don't really need to have ties to any villains, so let's throw them under the bus. And Artemis wrecked shop, and she's like, woo, like, good, Artemis 1, bad guy 0. It's like, she kicked ass and just bounced. I'm like, okay. Cool. And it's so awkward and weird just seeing them all suited together doing their superhero thing. Here's the JSA, and here's Cindy right beside them. I'm like, oh, this looks so weird, and I love it. I do love the Gambler coming back to town. I was like, oh man, he's here to steer trouble, but he's like, nope. He's like, oh, I came back. He's like, I also got your mail. And he's talking about a daughter he has. I'm like, Jesus, even you? I'm like, because I love that the show leans into the next generation all around, whether it's the villains, whether it's the heroes. And the moment the Gambler started talking about his daughter Becky, how his wife had given her up for adoption, and he wants to be a better father because he looks at what Pat has done, and he talks about how his father abandoned him and he doesn't want to be like that. And the moment it's focused on Courtney, I was like, oh, of course Courtney's going to be super sympathetic. And she even tells the JSA later on the reason why she's willing to give him a second chance is like her own father is not the greatest dude, and it's like, this villain is willing to do more, trying his best to make up for the past with his daughter, and my own father can't even do that. This villain is a better person than my dad. That's why she's willing to give him a second chance. The fact is, he's willing to, do this. I mean, because truth be told, is also like, they're all kind of dealing with their second chances. Like, after everything that went down between his uncle, yes, it was Eclipso, but still, this is kind of Rick's second chance. I don't know if Courtney would never say that because she wouldn't want them to feel that way. But and maybe eventually Yolanda and Rick will look at that too, like somewhat this is their second chances as well. But, maybe that's once again me reading too much into it. I even love her being like, oh, like, this is where you guys hang out, just like your stepfather's, like, car garage. It's like, yeah, it's the only place big enough to hold Stripe. She's like, we could go back to my place, which I was almost like, there's an element of her not admitting it. She has no one. She doesn't have, I even love that line where she threw in Yolanda's face. She's like, oh, you're still dealing with your trauma or whatever. I'm like, shut up, Cindy, like, that's super mean to kind of throw that in her face. Like, oh, I can't believe you're still dealing with your trauma. It's like, well, to be fair, I mean, but it's almost not poetic, but it almost makes sense why Cindy would, because it's like, oh, you're dealing with your trauma. It's like, I dealt with my trauma. I came face to face with my trauma last season. Get over it. It's like, she knows how to do is be the mean girl, because that's her way of overcompensating, like with her we learned so much about her relationship with her dad, her everything that went down with her mom. So of course, like we've already known for a while she's kind of had complicated issues when it comes on the mother front, but obviously we got more context and understanding to it last season. So everything Cindy does is kind of like, her overcompensating, but at the same time, like, I think there is a good person that is there, but she keeps up the mean girl front so much because I think it's all she has. Because other than that, like, if that's stripped away, then like who she is will be laid bare, and she doesn't want people to see that side of herself. She wants to keep strong because like her dad kind of turned her into her dad turned her into Shiv, and it's like that's being a sharpened blade is kind of her only way to exist, Like, she can't go back to being that girl she was before, So, there's that. Plus, but, like, also her being like, yeah, we should go back to my place. It's like, yeah, like, I mean, they still have access to, like, the old ISA, like, headquarters and stuff like that. So, I'm like, not unless they make that the new base or whatever, but I don't know if that'd be big enough. Well, because they kept Solomon Grundy down there, so it would be big enough to keep Stripe down there. But it's also like, there's some level of her almost being like, want to go over to my house and hang out? Oh, we can drink wine. And it's like, well, we don't drink on the job. And Beth's like, well, we don't drink at all. Not 21 yet. She's like, Jesus, is so lame, And while everyone's all about, like, villains shouldn't be given a second chance, obviously talking about Cindy, but also the gambler, as well as Sportsmaster and his wife, who are also, like, Sportsmaster is like, you can't trust a gambler, he's a liar. Hell, the gambler even tried to go to the Shade, who's trying to get a decent cup of coffee. He's like, Maria, I'm just a touch, She's like, oh, I'm sorry, and she keeps trying, and he's just so disgusted by it. But the gambler tried to come, he's like, you don't have a daughter. It's like, no, the daughter stuff is true, which it seems like it really, really is. But the Shade wanted nothing to do with it. He's like, yeah, I'm sure you're kind of upset because, like, last time, like, with the ISA, I kind of ended up stealing all your money, and his eyes going black, and he's like, go. But then he feels his eyes, and there's a little spark of, like, lantern's light. So I guess I'm assuming his powers are going to, like, he isn't back to 100%, and maybe over the course of the season, all that makes him the Shade will eventually start fading away. Maybe that's what that's going to start being about. That's definitely going to be interesting. But circling back to the gambler, it does seem like he is sincere in what he is all about. It does seem like he is legitimately looking for his daughter, and he is trying to turn over a new leaf because, like, the gun he had, like, after he was looking outside because he felt like something was off, he threw the gun away. But then as he's looking through some stuff, even writing a letter to his daughter, he ended up stumbling across the security footage. Because at one point you saw early in the episode when he was sitting down with Pat and Courtney, and I was like, did they just showcase the fact is that they're being spied on? And it turns out they are. I'm assuming this has to do with Ginny's brother, like that whole thing they set up last season. They kind of brought it back as like that stinger at the end of season 2 with was it Mr. Bones or whatever, the guy that's voiced by Keith David. I think obviously that was a major through line that was never brought back around, but I'm assuming this has something to do with that. Because they took an interest in Courtney and them, like when they came looking for Ginny and her asking a whole bunch of questions about her brother and stuff. So I'm assuming this is them keeping an eye on things on that front. But he happens to look into surveillance footage. I was like, because the episode title was like The Murder or something. I was like, oh, he's about to die. And I'm like, there's a laundry list of people who wanted him dead. So I was like, oh, is this going to kind of turn into a bit of a mystery? Which it seems like it is. But by the time they show up, he's already dead. And lo and behold, who's over the body but Cindy holding the gun? You're like, cool. I know you didn't do it, but still. And the thing is, like, Yolanda and Rick really hate you. Yolanda in particular, which, to be fair, she has every right to hate you. So, of course, like, they're probably not going to be willing to give you a second chance. But immediately I'm like, oh, is there a bit of are we going to, like, at the very least, it's the next episode, or maybe even the entire season going to be built around kind of like a murder mystery aspect, because everyone had plenty of motive to want the gambler dead. Both his allies and his enemies kind of pissed him off. So, we'll see. Like I said, It's going to be interesting because I feel like it might all tie back into Sylvester. Because once again, we still don't fully know why he's back. But also like him subjugating, not subjugating, but like relegating Pat to being a psychic again. He's like, no, I'm not Stripesy, I'm a Stripe. And he's explaining, he's like, yeah. And it's like kind of like, it's like, oh, I think because we never really got we got glimpses of that dynamic, but I think this season we'll really get to lean into it. And I think Pat's not the same person he was then. Like, he kind of accepted and was kind of okay with that role, but he's kind of like, no, I'm not the sidekick anymore. So I think at the beginning he's going to be leaning into, like, you know, following Sylvester's lead, falling back into that role, and I think that's going to put him and Courtney at odds, just like it will her and Sylvester. But I think eventually he'll kind of recognize, like, right, the way this isn't his show to run. This is about the next generation. It's time for you just to pass the torch. That I think this will be his last rodeo, and it probably won't be until the end of the season when he fully recognizes that, but we'll have to wait and see. There was like a monstrous growl, so part of me wonders, was it Grundy that attacked him, or maybe someone else? In Rick's attempt to bring back Grundy, maybe someone else did in the process, or maybe there's something, because it sounded like it was like a hulking monster or something. It made you go like, oh, like it could have been Grundy. So not unless someone managed to do what Rick couldn't and brought Grundy back, or maybe Grundy came back on his own, attacked the gambler, he was able to talk his way around it, but then someone else showed up and killed him because someone else was like, oh, it's like, oh, he found the surveillance footage, we need to, like, take care of him now, or they were probably already gunning for him either way. I don't know. I'm so excited to have Stargirl back. I've talked about it. I've saw like the smallest things of promo, but I've avoided like most promo and all the trailers. I'm going into this season having no idea what to fully expect, so I am so excited. This season's going to be great. I could just tell from this beginning already, but I'm excited to see how this all plays out, kind of the mysteries that end up getting revealed, and just like it's not, once again, it's not even like Legends of Tomorrow where it's like, oh, like two villains. It's like, no, the squad's like half and half. Half villains are just like out and about in town, and you know there's heroes as well. So that dynamic going forward this season is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm so excited for the show to really deep dive into that. So I'm excited to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.